So we got a question from Charlie Perez. He says, my academy does not give away stripes. How can I know my level? So how do I know that I'm progressing in jiu-jitsu without having those stripes, those little, pats on the back along the way towards the belt? So brother, thank you for the question. And I chose this question specifically because of the fact that I didn't get a stripe in jiu-jitsu until I was a purple belt. So my first 2 promotions, from white to blue, blue to purple, I did not receive a single stripe. But it really wasn't a big deal because when I got into jiu-jitsu, I'd come from wrestling, and in wrestling we don't have stripes, right? We didn't get stripes. We were just simply rolling against each other, wrestling against each other, and you would judge your performance based on how you were doing in training. And so when I got into jiu-jitsu, I can say this firmly, I've never been focused on a belt or a stripe, and that's a good thing because a lot of times stripes and belts absolutely ruin this damn thing because people get so hung up on this piece of tape or this piece of cotton that's been wrapped around their waist. If people don't get them, they think that they're doing poorly, even though none of that stuff matters, right? You should always be focused on the process of what you're doing day to day rather than any sort of end result. Those end results come, right? And again, always remember this, guys. This is sort of a side note because I get these questions about belts and stripes all the time. They're just representations of who you are and what you're doing, right? They're not necessarily the thing, right? So for instance, if I say that's a tree, right? A tree is a word, it's a symbol used to represent what that is. The tree is cells and leaves and all these different things, but me saying what it is, that's just a symbol. I'm using language. It's a symbol to represent what that is. And the belts and stripes are simply symbols to represent something about you, whatever your gym decides that these mean, right? Because every gym's a little bit different. It's very subjective. A great example of this is that we have a guy training with me right now who's been training for well over 10 years. He's fought professional mixed martial arts. He's really friggin' tough. If I wanted to say if he was competing, what level he could compete at, he would be an expert probably somewhere around brown belt as far as his ability to roll. He's tough. But he was never given a belt in jiu-jitsu. He just never really got one for whatever reason. So he came into our gym about 6 months ago with a white belt on. And, I've been telling people like, hey, listen, you got to be watching for this guy because he's really tough. So the other day I gave him a blue belt just so that he had like a colored belt on instead of a white belt because like people would roll with him who hadn't met him yet. And they're like, who is this guy? I'm like, yeah, it's not the normal thing. Just because he had the belt or just because he did not have a colored belt on, just because he did not have a blue or purple belt or some stripes and some tape around his belt did not mean that he wasn't a monster. The dude's tough as hell, right? So understand that that's always what you're focused on is how good you're doing. How are you doing? All that other subjective stuff that you get along the way or that you have to test for, whatever, that stuff's those are results. Don't worry about those. Worry about the here and the now. And so that's what I want to dive into. So some of the things that really helped me with jiu-jitsu that came from wrestling was focusing, and that I think would help for you, Charlie, you're kind of saying about progress, is to judge your progress on how are you doing? Like, how are you doing when you roll with people? A lot of times in wrestling, we would use each other as markers, right? And kind of like you use each other's as like a measuring stick because I could say, well, I rolled with Jim today or I wrestled with Jim today. I'm just going to say them interchangeably at this point. And, he caught me in this move. All right, well, I remember what he was doing. So tomorrow, I'm going to be ready to defend against that move, and I've got something whipped up for him. So the next day, I come in and I roll with him, and then I catch him in my move, and I stop his move, and then we kind of go back and forth. And then I know that I'm making progress because I said, hey, listen, he's doing this thing. I'm going to, to work against that, and I'm going to try my own thing. And again, that's when you start reflecting on your training, right? Like when you're leaving your gym and you're driving home, flip on some music, and just think about what happened. Play the matches over in your head, play the rolls over in your head, and think about, what could I do differently next time? Like what happened during the training? What did I do well? What did I do poorly? And especially with the poorly stuff, what could you do better? And make an objective judgment. Maybe you were giving your collar up to someone, you need to work on your grip breaks. Maybe, you were too far posture-wise inside the guard and you were giving up arms and getting armbarred. Whatever it is, think about those things and make objective judgments on them. Consult your coach and try to find corrections for those. And then when you come back to the gym, how did it work, right? You remember rolling is just a big feedback loop. You take these techniques that you're working on and you put them into this machine of rolling that's a giant feedback loop that spits it back out. Your scissor sweep sucks. You need to work on it. You need to improve, right? I mean, it's this kind of stuff, right? You're learning whether or not these things are working, and then you get feedback as to why they're not. You just have to look for it. And a lot of times, myself, like one of the biggest problems I had early on is that I had to focus on not being subjective about myself, meaning, let's say if I made a mistake from guard, instead of saying, man, I friggin' suck, my guard sucks. That's a subjective statement about myself, very, very, unuseful, not useful. useless. There we go. But when I say, okay, my guard got passed because I let this leg go down, I need to watch that next time. That's a useful, objective sort of statement that I can learn from. And so that's one of the big things, is judge yourself on how you're going against these people. The next thing is, how do you feel when you're rolling, right? How do you feel? Because I know that when I started wrestling, for instance, I was a fat little butterball. And then when I got into jiu-jitsu, I remember, I wasn't prepared for it. It was very new to me, and so I used to get very tired. But going back to wrestling, when I was a fat little butterball, I remember I could barely do the warm-up sometimes. And then on my very first match, my nickname in high school was Tugboat, because my very first match, I came off the mat like wheezing because I was like so out of shape. And then, they called me Tugboat because I sound like a tugboat coming off the mat. And then I went from that to being able to actually roll and compete without wheezing. And then even in jiu-jitsu, I started to feel more comfortable in certain positions. And that's kind of new. I knew that I was getting better because I felt more comfortable. I felt more at ease instead of being worried or instead of being really tense all the time. And so you can judge it not just on how you're doing against the people, but how do you feel, right? How does everything feel right now? Do you feel like you're moving smoother? Are you able to roll longer than what you did last time? Can you, roll an extra round? Whatever it is, right? Do you feel better about the way that things are going? That's another thing. And again, I know that for some of you guys that are like sort of analytically minded, you're logically minded, you're mathematically driven sometimes. I've had students where they feel like they need this linear, like step by step progression, and it doesn't exist in jiu-jitsu, right? Like if we took 10 students and I lined them up, I taught them the same exact techniques over and over again, they got the same exact jiu-jitsu training, the same amount of time, same everything. Every one of these people is different. They learn differently, and different things are going to connect with them. Everything's so different. So they're going to have different skill jumps. They're going to learn different techniques and hold on to those different techniques. Everyone's going to be all over the place. It's not a linear progression, and it's not going to be. And so you have to let go, because I get these questions a lot where people are saying, what is the technique that I'm supposed to learn? I can't give you that answer because there isn't one. It's all over the place. There's some basics that you can get into, but everybody's going to kind of go in their own path, and you got to be willing to let that happen and not be too focused on, like I said, belts and stripes and this like step-by-step approach, because it just doesn't work very well in jiu-jitsu, at least I've found in my experience. So again, those are the big things. How are you rolling with other people? How does that feel? Are you improving? You can judge those things. How am I doing against Bob today? Bob crushed me yesterday. I did a little bit better against Bob. I survived a little bit better against Bob this time, right? You know you're improving because he didn't submit you, but you survived, right? That's good. Second thing is how do you feel when you're rolling, right? Man, I was able to roll 3 rounds today. Whew, I felt better. I've never been able to roll 3 rounds yet. Maybe it's 4, whatever it is. Whatever it is for you, it's relative to you, always. Again, you're in the gym for yourself. You can know that. The last thing I would say is just, are you enjoying yourself, right? No matter what, remember this thing is supposed to be fun. You're supposed to have a good time, and it's supposed to be something that brings positivity into your life. Don't pervert it with like this hell-bent progress thing. Have fun with it. Enjoy it. No matter how hard you train, you should always enjoy those training sessions. I know that even for me, on my most frustrating days where I felt like I just couldn't put anything together, I was still always happy that I trained. So Charlie, I bounced all over the place, brother, and I hope that you were able to take something from this and again, help you out with your situation. But that's what I would say. Don't worry about those stripes. Worry about all those things that are going on in the here and the now. It's always going to be process over results, right? The things that you can control versus the things that they just kind of come along. Focus on those processes. The things that you can control in the day to day, the here and the now. So, brother, thank you for the question. I'll talk to you guys next time.